Imagine boarding a flight, ticket in hand, ready to settle into your first-class seat only to be told you don't belong there. Now imagine that you are Dr. Camilla Reese, a calm, powerful black CEO who owns a quarter of the very airline whose crew just humiliated her in front of dozens of passengers. What would you do when your dignity is ripped apart alongside your ticket? Would you stay silent or stand firm against blatant discrimination? This story takes place entirely on a plane, a confined space where invisible social hierarchies crash violently with raw human emotions. Camilla's journey is not just about a ticket or a seat. It is a battle for respect, justice, and the power to change an entire system that still allows prejudice to thrive in the shadows. Who has the courage to confront this injustice? How far will one woman go to hold those responsible accountable? And what does it really mean to lead with strength and empathy in a world that often refuses to see your true worth? Join us as we uncover the gripping, emotional story of courage, resilience, and reckoning aboard Flight 622. If you believe in justice and equality, hit like, share this story, and subscribe so you never miss a moment of truth and inspiration. The hum of the jet bridge filled the terminal as passengers lined up for pre-boarding on Halcyon Flight 326 to San Francisco. Business travelers glanced at their phones while others clutched coffee cups, shifting from one foot to the other. It was the usual pre-flight rhythm, impatient, routine, predictable, but for Dr. Camilla Reese, the moment she stepped onto the jet bridge, something in the air changed. She carried herself with quiet dignity. Her navy blue travel suit was crisp, her heels purposeful but understated. A delicate gold watch peeked from beneath her sleeve. No loud jewelry, no fanfare, just presence. She rolled her carry-on smoothly behind her, the kind with leather handles and a polished finish. The kind people notice but don't question. She offered a polite nod to the flight attendant at the door, who barely glanced up. "Boarding pass," the woman said curtly. Camilla handed it over. The flight attendant, Lori Hastings, scanned it and hesitated. "There must be a mistake," Lori said, her brow furrowing. "This is a first-class seat?" Camilla's eyes met hers calmly. "Yes," she replied. "Seat 2A. Lori's smile was tight. "You're flying first class?" "Yes," Camilla answered evenly, not giving an inch. Lori looked again at the ticket, then at Camilla. Something flickered behind her eyes. Doubt, challenge, dismissal. Camilla said nothing more. She simply walked forward, as if the conversation had ended, because to her, it had. She found her seat by the window 2A, just as her boarding pass had promised, and sat down. She adjusted the armrest, placed her briefcase under the seat in front of her, and exhaled slowly. But her calm was pierced by the sound of a forced cough. Lori had followed her. "I'm going to need to verify something with the gate," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Can you stay standing for a moment, ma'am?" The passengers in the row behind glanced up. A man in 2B looked awkwardly toward the window. Camilla stood, slowly and silently. Her eyes met Lori's again, not anger, not fear, just stillness. Lori turned on her heel and strode back down the aisle, heels clicking with purpose. The young male flight attendant, Ben Taylor, leaned over to whisper something to her at the galley. Both of them chuckled. Camilla remained standing by her seat. After a full 2 minutes, Lori returned, her voice louder now, intended for others to hear. "There seems to be a mistake in our system. I'm going to ask you to step aside while we sort it out." Camilla didn't move. What kind of mistake, she asked. Ben moved forward now, flanking Lori. We'll need to reseat you while we recheck your booking. We may have to move you to the back temporarily. Camilla didn't flinch, but her eyes locked on Ben. This is my confirmed seat, she said. Is there a reason you're trying to remove me? Lori exhaled sharply. We're just following protocol. Camilla looked around. The man in 2B now stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice. A couple behind her whispered. A middle-aged woman across the aisle raised her eyebrows. Camilla retrieved her phone from her blazer and calmly tapped in a number. She turned slightly toward the window and said quietly, Jennifer, this is Camilla. I need you to contact legal. There was a long pause. Ben blinked. Wait, who exactly are you? He asked, voice unsure now. Camilla ended the call and turned back. I'm Dr. Camilla Reese. I'm the CEO of Halcyon Airlines. The words did not ring out with volume. They didn't need to. They cut the air. Lori froze. Ben's mouth hung slightly open. Then, another voice rose from the back of the cabin. Excuse me, did I just hear that correctly? A woman in her mid-30s stood up from row 5. Her dark hair was in a clean bun. Her phone, now clearly recording. I'm Valerie Cheng. I write for Skywatch Journal, and I think you all just made a very public mistake. Lori turned to her. Ma'am, please stay seated. No, I don't think so, Valerie said. You've just publicly challenged a black woman about her first-class seat in front of half the cabin, and it turns out she's the CEO of the airline. Ben stammered. We didn't know who she was. We just thought. You thought what? Valerie asked sharply. Silence. Then from the very back of the plane, a deep voice spoke up. Seems like you didn't think at all, the voice said. An older black man stood slowly in row 19, silver hair, trimmed neat blazer over his shoulder. This is the kind of thing that keeps happening. Over and over. Some of us are tired. Ben backed away slightly. Lori was pale. Camilla remained by her seat, still holding her phone. At that moment, a new voice crackled over the intercom. This is Captain Dennis Ward. I've been informed of a delay in boarding. Flight attendants, report to cockpit immediately. Lori and Ben exchanged a glance. Lori turned and walked quickly to the front. Camilla finally sat down. Maya Owens, a young flight attendant new to the airline, appeared at the side of the row. She looked at Camilla gently. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't know. I just joined the company 2 months ago. Camilla looked at her and softened. You don't need to apologize for what others did. Maya nodded and whispered, They're scared now. They should be. The plane remained grounded for 10 more minutes. Then the doors closed. The plane pushed back. Camilla stared out the window, watching the tarmac roll beneath her. But inside, something had shifted. She wasn't angry, she wasn't surprised, but she was done. This time, it wouldn't be swept under the rug. As Camilla Reese sat quietly in row 9, she became aware of just how loud silence could feel. The thin fabric of the cabin curtain that separated first class from the rest of the plane was barely 2 feet ahead of her. Yet it felt like a wall made of stone. That flimsy divider didn't just split the airplane cabin, it split status, it split assumptions, it split who gets asked. Would you like something to drink, ma'am, and who gets ignored like furniture? She gazed out the window again, pretending to admire the cloudy runway below, but her mind was restless. She could feel the throb of injustice in her chest like a slow drumbeat. It wasn't just about the seat anymore. It was what the seat represented. what the removal had implied, that someone like her, with her skin, her gender, her silence, her calm, didn't belong in comfort or dignity. What disturbed her wasn't just the humiliation, it was the familiarity of it. Camilla had lived this moment before, in boardrooms, in lobby check-ins, in meetings where people asked if she was with catering or if she needed help finding the HR office, and every time she had smiled with grace, smiled with the kind of patience her grandmother called ancestral, the patience of women who endured storms and still walked with their backs straight. This time, though, it was different. This wasn't a meeting or a conference call. This was her personal time, her breathing space, and they had invaded it. A soft voice next to her broke through the tension. "Excuse me," said a man seated beside her. I saw what happened back there." Camilla turned. He was a middle-aged Latino man, maybe in his late 40s, neatly dressed in a gray blazer, a laptop still open on the tray in front of him. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. That wasn't right." She gave a small nod. "Thank you. They didn't even check. They just assumed. I could tell something was off the way the attendant, Brenda, I think spoke to you. Cold, dismissive." Camilla's lips parted in surprise, then softened into gratitude. It wasn't often someone said it aloud, that they saw it too. "I've seen it happen," the man added. "Too many times. I keep thinking we're getting better as a country. But then," he shook his head, "still happens in plain sight." Camilla leaned back, her voice steady. "It's never really stopped. It just got quieter." For a moment, they sat in that shared stillness, two strangers acknowledging a truth too many were afraid to say. From her peripheral vision, Camilla noticed movement. The junior flight attendant, a young South Asian woman named Zara, she remembered the name from the safety announcement, walked briskly past her, hesitating briefly before disappearing behind the first-class curtain. Something about her pause struck Camilla. The way Zara looked at her. It wasn't pity, it wasn't judgment, it was almost understanding, a flicker of something unspoken. Camilla didn't think much of it, but her instincts were sharp, always had been, in business, in life, on the streets of Detroit, where she learned early that your gut was a better compass than a GPS. Then came the next sting. As the beverage cart rolled through the aisle, Camilla waited her turn. It stopped a few rows ahead. The same flight attendant. Brenda, the one who had removed her from first class, was serving drinks. Camilla exhaled, bracing herself. When the cart reached her row, Brenda didn't look at her. She offered a smile to the man beside Camilla. "What can I get you?" "Sir, just water," he said, glancing at Camilla, noticing the omission. Brenda poured, handed him a cup, and began pushing the cart forward. Camilla spoke, calm but direct. "Excuse me, you skipped me." Brenda froze for half a second, then turned, lips tight. "We'll be back shortly with another round." "You're not going to offer me anything now." Brenda raised an eyebrow. "It's standard to alternate rows if we're short on time." Camilla didn't move, but this row hasn't been served yet. A flicker of annoyance danced in Brenda's eyes. "I said we'll be back. Please be patient." Camilla said nothing else. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned back to the window and let the chill of the moment settle deep inside. She had given them the chance to behave with grace, twice, and they had failed. But she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As the engines revved and the plane began taxiing for takeoff, Camilla reached slowly into her bag. She retrieved her phone, not to make a call. Not yet. She opened a folder tucked in the Notes app. Inside were documents, flagged codes, and contact logs. She was prepared, always, because Camilla Reese wasn't just any woman in row 9. She was the chairwoman and CEO of Aerovar Holdings, the parent company of 3 aviation contractors, 2 compliance oversight firms, and a discrete stake in Skylinks Air, the very airline she now sat on. The woman they had ignored, humiliated, and denied water to was their executive shareholder. But even now, Camilla wasn't moved by vengeance. She didn't want to make a scene. That wasn't her way. She wanted accountability, truth, reflection. Her fingers hovered over the draft message to the Director of Aviation Compliance. Then she paused, because deep down, she still asked herself, what if I let it go this one time? What if I just enjoy the flight, like they clearly wanted me not to? What if I just rest? But another voice inside whispered, and what about the next black woman they do this to, the one who doesn't have your power? That settled it. She hit save. The plane began to ascend, slicing into the clouds like it was cutting through something old and ugly. Camilla closed her eyes. The curtain ahead swayed slightly, but this time it no longer blocked her view, it framed it. And behind that curtain they had no idea what was coming. The tension lingered in the air like static before a storm. Camilla Reese sat upright, spine aligned, hands folded in her lap. She had returned to row 3, seat 3A, but the sting from the earlier humiliation hadn't faded. Her calm exterior remained intact, but behind her composed gaze, the embers of disbelief and quiet hurt still burned. Across the aisle, the passengers around her pretended not to stare. A man in business casual kept glancing over his newspaper. A young woman in a hoodie lowered her AirPods and watched intently. Even the couple seated behind Camilla had fallen into a curious silence. They had seen it. Everyone had. The refusal, the disrespect, the demotion to economy, and now her return. The atmosphere was shifting, not just around her but inside her. For most of her life, Camilla had learned to breathe through insult. As a black woman in power, especially in boardrooms lined with old money and older expectations, she'd mastered the art of resilience disguised as grace. But this time, something was different. Maybe it was the condescension. Maybe it was the smugness in the pilot's voice. Maybe it was the quiet ache in her chest that told her this wasn't just about her anymore. She reached into her bag and pulled out her leather-bound notebook. Not a laptop, not a phone, just the old-fashioned comfort of paper and pen. She jotted something in tight, neat script, a habit she'd developed during her residency years to process high-stress moments. Words soothed her, even now. As she wrote, she felt a presence step into the aisle. Dr. Reese. Camilla looked up slowly. It was the flight attendant from earlier, not the rude one, Marnie. That was her name, but the younger one with the softer tone. Zara Patel. Zara's posture was respectful, almost deferential. Her eyes showed something that hadn't appeared in anyone else on that crew, so far regret. I just wanted to say, I saw what happened earlier. That shouldn't have happened. I'm sorry. Camilla didn't speak right away. Her eyes scanned the young woman's face. She was in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, South Asian descent, curly dark hair tied in a tidy low bun. There was sincerity in her voice, but also fear. "Thank you," Camilla finally said, her voice low, firm. It did happen. And you watched it? Zara bit her bottom lip. Yes, ma'am, I did. Why didn't you say something then? The question wasn't an attack. It was a mirror, a soft but unflinching one. Zara shifted her weight, looking down. Because I was afraid. I didn't know who you were. I just knew Marnie was the lead on this flight, and she doesn't like being challenged. Camilla closed her notebook. That's the thing about fear. It's contagious, but so is courage. A beat of silence passed between them. Camilla could see the young woman wrestling with something inside. A choice. Whether to stay complicit or take a stand. Zara straightened slightly. You're right. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate, even if it's not my section. Camilla offered a small nod. That's appreciated. As Zara turned to leave, Camilla called out quietly, Your voice may be small here, but it's still a voice. The young woman paused, then nodded with something like determination in her eyes before stepping away. Camilla turned back toward the window. The engine hum, once soothing, now felt like white noise against the storm forming in her thoughts. Why had this moment shaken her so deeply? It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated. Certainly not the first time someone had looked at her skin, her gender, her stillness, and assumed she didn't belong. But it was the first time in a long while that she'd felt it ripple through her body in a way that felt personal. Like an echo from her mother's voice reminding her, You don't just carry your name, you carry ours. She was still staring out the window when her phone vibrated. A message flashed across the screen. From Brandon Pierce, subject Reflight 903. It was short, everything said on my end. Just say the word. Camilla didn't reply. Not yet. The word she was about to say would cost people their jobs, and that wasn't a decision she made lightly, even in the face of disrespect. She understood the weight of power, but there was another vibration, this time from her email, an alert. 3 passengers had submitted complaints to Horizon Air's customer service form about a racially biased incident in first class. Camilla blinked slowly. It had begun. Not just the corporate mechanism of accountability, but the ripple. The public saw. The public was speaking. She scrolled further and found something that made her still. A forwarded tweet. Passenger on Flight 903 just witnessed black woman in first class refused seat she paid for. Then saw same woman pull out a notebook with FAA watermark and write notes. I think someone messed with the wrong one. It had over 50,000 views already. The comments were rolling in, and there it was, the viral unraveling. Camilla sighed. She had planned to stay quiet, take notes, debrief her team later, handle it internally. But this wasn't internal anymore. Now it was public. She opened her email again. Drafted a reply to Brandon. Prepare the formal HR inquiry, full crew, level 3 clearance, begin review on Marnie Ellison's file immediately. She hit send. No more hesitation. Suddenly, the seat felt smaller, the cabin colder, her presence heavier. She looked around the first-class cabin, not to make a scene, not for validation, but to see the room for what it was. A space where privilege had assumed she was invisible, but she wasn't, not anymore, and she was about to prove it. For the first minute after Camilla returned to her new seat, there was only silence. Not just outside, but within her. She stared blankly ahead, her hands resting on her lap, fingers tightly intertwined, She could feel the curious glances from nearby passengers, could hear a cough from 2 rows behind her, and the distinct hum of air conditioning from the overhead vent. But her mind was running through the events like a security reel she couldn't pause. She had been calm, controlled. She hadn't raised her voice or demanded anything. So why did it feel like she had just been shouted at by 1,000 unseen voices? Why did her chest feel like it was holding its breath for something the world would never let her have? Dignity. It should be a given, not a request. Across the aisle, a woman gently cleared her throat. Camilla turned and met her gaze. The woman had warm eyes worn with years and a faint scar near her left eyebrow. She didn't speak. She just nodded. Slowly, deliberately. Camilla returned the nod. It was small, but it cracked the isolation. From her phone, resting on airplane mode, she scrolled through notes. Not work this time. She opened a folder titled Moments. In it were photos of her niece's birthday last week, a poem she'd written the night her mother passed, and a recording labeled simply, Dad. She tapped play. The man's voice came through the earbuds with clarity. If you walk through their fire, don't forget who you are. They will try to burn your name. Don't let them. She closed her eyes and let the memory wash over her like ocean water. It was her father's voice from a conversation 2 years ago. He'd been dying then. Cancer. But even near the end, he'd held on to one truth that the world may not always see her for who she was. But she had to. The intercom crackled again. Brenda's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our in-flight beverage service shortly. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened. Camilla watched her emerge with a forced smile, pushing the cart slowly through the aisle. She wondered what story Brenda had told the rest of the crew. Probably something that painted her as difficult, demanding, maybe even dangerous. Black women in power weren't often allowed to be complex. They were assigned roles, and Camilla had played the angry passenger far too many times in other people's narratives. Brenda reached her row, paused, and asked, "Something to drink?" Camilla looked up, her tone measured. "Water with lemon, please." Brenda blinked, then said flatly, "We don't have lemon on board." Camilla gave a slight nod. "Water is fine." Brenda poured it and moved on, a few rows behind. Camilla heard a whisper. It wasn't loud enough to decipher the words, but the tone was unmistakably sarcastic. Another flight attendant chuckled softly. She didn't look back. The plane rattled slightly with turbulence. Camilla gripped the armrest, then slowly relaxed. As the beverage cart continued its slow journey, a child in the seat beside her began crying softly. The mother, a woman in her 30s, looked exhausted. She bounced the baby on her lap, trying to hush him. Camilla turned slightly and offered, "Would you like me to hold something while you comfort him?" The woman looked surprised, then relieved. Thank you. I just need a moment to settle him down." Camilla took the diaper bag gently and placed it by her feet. The woman rocked the child against her chest, cooing softly, slowly. The crying eased into sniffles. "You're really good with people," the woman said after a moment. Camilla smiled faintly. "I try to be. You shouldn't be in this row," the woman added under her breath. Camilla looked at her with a raised eyebrow. "I saw what happened up there," the woman continued, gesturing subtly toward first class. "And I saw how you handled it, with more grace than I think most people could muster." Camilla didn't reply, but her silence spoke volumes. Across the aisle, a teenage boy had been watching, not staring, but observing with a quiet intensity. His name tag badge from an aviation academy clued Camilla in. He was a student of the skies. He finally leaned over and said softly, "I'm sorry for what they did. You didn't deserve that." She turned to him, surprised. He continued, "I want to be a pilot someday, but I don't want to work for an airline that lets things like that happen." Camilla's chest tightened slightly. "Then be the kind of pilot who changes that." He nodded. "Seriously, can I ask?" He hesitated. "Are you someone important?" Camilla smiled gently. "I'm someone with a choice, and right now, I'm choosing to sit here because that's where they think I belong." The boy blinked. Processing that, she added, "But what matters more than where you sit is what you see and what you do next." He looked down at his notebook, then quickly scribbled something on the page. Meanwhile, up front, Zara stood by the curtain separating the cabins. The junior flight attendant had witnessed everything. She'd heard Brenda's comments, watched the tension build, and now she felt it like a storm cloud above her own name badge. She wasn't sure what line had been crossed, but something inside her said it was too far. The way Camilla had sat there, quiet and dignified, while the crew whispered and laughed around her. It didn't sit right. Zara turned, stepped into the galley, and pulled out her phone. She opened the anonymous reporting app required by the airline's DEI initiative, but she hesitated. Would it matter? Would anyone read it? Would she be dismissed for rocking the boat? Then she looked again toward row 9, toward Camilla's calm, composed frame. She started typing. Midway through, Captain Ray Connors stepped out from the cockpit and glanced down the aisle. He scanned the passengers, spotted Brenda, and gave her a brief nod. Brenda responded with an air of smug professionalism, but when his eyes landed on Camilla, something flickered. Recognition, not of face, but of presence. He didn't say anything, not yet, but the eyes in row 7 had already seen enough. The story was only beginning. Camilla Reese sat still in her economy seat, her spine straight, eyes fixed on the back of the seat in front of her. The low hum of the engines could not drown out the tension that gripped her shoulders. Around her, whispers crawled like vines. She knew the murmurs weren't about turbulence or arrival time. They were about her, about what they had seen, or what they thought they saw. She had asked a simple question. She had been met with something far from a simple answer. Across the aisle, the young man with earbuds kept glancing in her direction, a mixture of curiosity and discomfort etched on his face. The couple in row 14, seated just behind her, had fallen uncomfortably silent after their short, lively conversation about a vineyard tour in Oregon. The energy on the plane had shifted. Camilla felt it all, not because she was sensitive, but because she had learned, painfully and precisely, how to measure a room without ever raising her voice. Years of navigating boardrooms, panels, contracts, and stairs had taught her to read temperature changes like a human thermostat, and this flight had suddenly gone cold. The seatbelt light blinked. A flight attendant with a honey blonde bun and furrowed brow passed by. She looked at Camilla but didn't acknowledge her. The same woman, Erin Langley, who had told her the first-class seat was taken. Erin's tone had been clipped, the kind of clipped that didn't leave room for questions. Camilla had tried anyway, asked to check her ticket again, asked, calmly, if there might be a mistake, but Erin hadn't checked. She hadn't paused. She had looked down at Camilla like someone who had already made up her mind and delivered the decision like a verdict. That seat was not hers. Camilla hadn't made a scene, but inside, something had stirred, something she had spent years quieting. As the beverage cart rolled out, Camilla turned toward the window. Below them, clouds formed slow-moving waves. Somewhere down there were people with stories like hers, or worse, people who had been moved, silenced, dismissed. She remembered what her father once said to her after she had come home from school in tears because a teacher refused to believe she had written her own essay. "Baby girl, the world doesn't always let us in the front door, but we build our own buildings." She had built one, the kind of company people whispered about in think tanks, the kind of leadership that earned her awards she didn't even attend to accept. And yet, here she was, in row 17C, not because of an error, but because someone had looked at her and decided she didn't belong. The irony tasted bitter. The cart stopped next to her row. A young flight attendant named Jessie offered a tight smile. "Would you like a drink?" "Ma'am." Camilla met his eyes. "Hot tea. No sugar. Please." He nodded. Aaron passed behind him, muttering something under her breath. Camilla couldn't make it out completely, but she heard the word difficult. She felt heat rise behind her eyes. Not anger, not yet. Something older. Something like grief. Jessie returned with the tea, carefully setting it down. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "What's your name, Jessie Monroe?" "Ma'am, I appreciate your kindness." "Jessie." He gave a slight nod, then moved on. Camilla held the cup, feeling its warmth, letting it ground her. She closed her eyes briefly, breathed in the steam, in and out. She had work to do when she landed, a meeting with the Education Initiative in Chicago, a visit to the nonprofit in Bronzeville. There wasn't room for distraction. There never had been. But this moment, this insult, wasn't something she could let pass. She took out her phone. Her assistant had already texted Simone Hurd from the gate agent. "Something's off. Want me to dig?" Camilla typed. "Camilla." "Yes," discreetly. "I'll handle things from here." Simone replied within seconds. "Simone, they forgot who you are." "You want me to remind them?" Camilla almost smiled. "Almost." "Camilla, not yet. Let's see if they remember." She placed the phone back in her bag and leaned back. Her reflection flickered faintly in the darkened window. A woman with pressed navy slacks, a cream blouse, and a soft gray cardigan stared back. A woman whose natural coils framed her face like a crown. She had made it a point, over the years, never to straighten herself for anyone's comfort. A sudden jolt, the plane hit mild turbulence. Oxygen masks didn't drop, but the quiet was disrupted by startled gasps and the sound of plastic cups clinking. Camilla didn't move. Her fingers remained around the T. From the front of the plane, she heard raised voices. Another passenger, a middle-aged black man, had apparently been asked to show his ticket again. He wasn't being loud. He was being questioned, loudly. Camilla turned slightly in her seat. She couldn't see his face, but she recognized the tone in the flight attendant's voice. Suspicion disguised as protocol. And there it was again. She had learned to recognize it not just in words, but in posture, in the pitch of politeness, in who got asked to explain themselves and who didn't. The man was seated. He showed his ticket. The attendant left. Camilla turned back and closed her eyes. How many times would they be asked to prove they belonged? How many times could someone be told without words, "You are a problem"? The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, We're experiencing some mild turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll be descending into Chicago shortly." Camilla reopened her eyes. Chicago, home of her headquarters, home of her legal team, home of a network that had eyes and ears in every major port of transit. She pulled out her notepad and began writing. Not an angry letter, not a statement, a list of names, descriptions, incidents, timings. She wrote slowly, carefully, because when the world tells you that you are too much, too difficult, too different to sit in the seat you paid for, you respond with clarity, not noise, and the storm was coming. This time, with a name, Camilla Reese. The plane cruised through calm skies, but inside Dr. Camilla Reese's mind, the air was far from still. As the first-class cabin returned to a fragile hush, whispers traveled like sparks along a fuse. She could feel it, the crackle of something inevitable building beneath the surface. Camilla sat quietly in 3B, her hands still on her lap, the weight of her presence heavier than before. Some passengers offered her apologetic glances. Others stared with blank discomfort, but she wasn't concerned with their reactions. Her focus narrowed on what needed to be done. "Would you like a glass of water?" asked a young attendant quietly, her voice almost trembling. It wasn't Victoria. Camilla turned toward her. The woman was in her early 20s, likely new. Her name tag read Danny. Camilla studied her eyes for a moment. There was no mockery in them, no condescension, only uncertainty. "Yes, thank you," Camilla replied softly. "And if you don't mind, would you tell your supervisor I would like to speak with her before landing?" Danny gave a quick nod, then turned, nearly tripping over the edge of the aisle carpet in her haste. Camilla rested her head back against the seat. The coldness she felt earlier had given way to something more focused. Her pulse no longer raced. Her breathing was steady. This was where clarity lived, in the pause after the hurt, in the eye of a quiet storm. As she stared out the window, the clouds below looked like fields of cotton, soft, deceptive. She thought of her grandmother, a woman who once picked actual cotton under the sun in Mississippi, and still had more dignity in her silence than most leaders she'd met in boardrooms. "You don't become strong by shouting," her grandmother once told her. "You become strong by knowing who you are. The world will tremble at that alone." Camilla whispered the words again to herself. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're cruising at 37,000 feet. Please sit back and enjoy the rest of your flight. We'll be beginning meal service shortly." She noticed Victoria hadn't returned to first class. Instead, 2 other attendants had quietly rotated in. One was the young woman Danny. The other was a middle-aged man with graying hair and downcast eyes. Neither of them made contact. Camilla didn't need them to. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and drafted a quick message: "Live incident aboard Flight 622. Unacceptable conduct by senior crew. Will explain upon landing. Prepare compliance files. Notify legal and PR to be on standby." She hit send. That was all it took. Back in coach, a boy no older than 10 pointed toward the front. "Daddy, isn't that the lady from the TV, the tech company one?" His father looked up from his tablet. Recognition dawned slowly. His mouth parted. "Yeah," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "That's her." In first class, the recognition began to ripple. A few glanced at their phones. A quick search brought up headlines, photos, conference speeches, commencement addresses. A woman, not just known, but respected. One of the top black CEOs in the country. Forbes, MIT, the White House, passengers who had remained silent now looked at her with unease. Had they witnessed something wrong? Had they been complicit? Camilla could feel it without looking. The way people reevaluated everything when they realized power had entered the room. But she had always been powerful. That part hadn't changed. Only their awareness had. Just then, she felt a presence stop beside her seat. "Dr. Reese," came a voice. It was Victoria. Her face had shifted from condescending to careful, measured. "I understand you requested to speak with me." Camilla turned her head slowly, meeting her gaze with an expression devoid of hostility, yet unrelentingly calm. "Yes," she said. "I asked to speak with whoever is in charge of this cabin." "That would be me," Victoria replied. "I want to apologize for earlier. There was a misunderstanding about your seating and a procedural mix-up. We've corrected it, of course." Camilla didn't blink. "What part of it was procedural? When you told me to go back to coach without checking the manifest, or when you decided I didn't belong here based on a glance?" Victoria paused. "I assure you, it wasn't personal." Camilla leaned forward slightly, voice still low. "That's the thing. It was personal. The moment you made assumptions about who I was, where I belonged, and how I should respond, I really don't think now is the time." "Victoria," Camilla said quietly, "you've already had your time." A long silence followed. "I won't escalate this further," Victoria said, forcing a brittle smile. "I'm glad we could resolve the misunderstanding." "It's not resolved," Camilla replied gently, "but it will be soon." Victoria's expression hardened just for a second. "I've worked for this airline for 18 years. Camilla nodded. "Then I expect you know what compliance, equity, and protocol are, which makes your choices today even more disappointing." Without another word, Victoria turned and walked away. Camilla closed her eyes. That small confrontation had taken more energy than she wanted to admit. She wasn't angry anymore. She was simply tired. Tired of bearing the weight of always being the one to stay calm, to educate, to endure, to rebuild after others casually knocked her humanity off its foundation. Later, as the plane began its descent, the silence in the cabin turned tense. People sat straighter, eyes flicked between passengers and crew. Just before landing, Camilla's phone vibrated. A text from her chief operating officer, Ezra Grant. Received. "Landing team will meet you at terminal. Legal already coordinating. Press statement ready within the hour." Camilla smiled faintly. Ezra was a man of few words, but when he moved, the ground did too. She placed the phone in her lap and exhaled. As the plane touched down, a quiet murmur passed through the cabin, not because of turbulence, but because something had shifted in the air. The weight of consequences was circling, and it would not miss its landing. And yet, in that moment, all Camilla could think about was her grandmother again, the woman who told her, "Baby, if they ever try to shrink you to fit, grow taller instead." Camilla wasn't growing taller. She had already arrived. The seatbelt sign flickered off, and the cabin slowly stirred to life. Passengers stretched, reached into overhead bins, and exchanged murmurs about the upcoming landing in Chicago. But Camilla Reese sat with quiet focus, her fingers resting lightly on the armrest as she watched the flight attendants prepare for descent. She could feel the weight of what was to come. This was more than a flight. It was a reckoning, one that she had been preparing for in the back of her mind. since the moment she'd been denied that first-class seat. Her thoughts drifted to the people who had accompanied her on this journey, some silent allies, others silent observers. Zara Patel, the junior flight attendant whose courage had flickered like a candle in the dark. Jessie Monroe, whose kindness reminded her that not everyone on this plane was an adversary. Even Danny Flores, the young attendant who'd quietly offered water and respect when others refused. But the crew who had made the decision to humiliate her, those who had shredded her ticket and ignored her credentials, they were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. Camilla's phone vibrated. A message from Jennifer Lee, her trusted assistant. Board is ready for your call. Legal and PR on standby, waiting for your signal. Her breath hitched. The moment she had been steeling herself for had arrived. 5 minutes ago, as the plane cruised, Camilla had called the board of directors of Aerovar Holdings. Her voice was calm, her words clear. I'm on flight 622. We have a situation that needs immediate attention. They had been briefed on the earlier incidents, the racial discrimination, the refusal to honor her valid ticket, the shameful behavior of the senior flight crew. She had handed over all recorded evidence videos, witness statements, even a recording of flight attendants conspiring to erase her seat from the manifest. Now, the board was convening an emergency session in real time, preparing to take swift action. Camilla glanced at the passengers around her. Many were watching with curious eyes, sensing the electricity in the air. She exhaled slowly. It was time. With a gentle tap, she opened the in-flight intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Heads turned, phones lowered, and the cabin fell into an expectant hush. This is Dr. Camilla Reese, passenger in seat 3B, and a member of the board of directors for Aerovar Holdings. Her voice was steady, measured, commanding without raising volume. I want to thank each of you for your patience during this flight. A pause, letting the words settle. Earlier today, I experienced firsthand the very discrimination and disrespect that many passengers of color have quietly endured for far too long. She let that hang in the air. This is unacceptable. It is contrary to the values we hold at Aerovar Holdings and its subsidiaries. Her eyes scanned the cabin, briefly locking with passengers and crew alike. I have spoken with our board, legal, and human resources teams, and effective immediately upon landing. All personnel involved in this incident will be terminated. A murmur rose, some gasps, others nods of approval. This includes those who destroyed my ticket, ignored my credentials, and acted with prejudice and disregard for dignity. Camilla's gaze settled on the curtain dividing first class and economy, where the faces of the senior crew could be seen pale, shocked, powerless. I will personally oversee the full investigation to ensure such actions never happen again. A woman near the front clapped softly. A few others joined, cautious but hopeful. Camilla continued. We have a responsibility to our passengers, our employees, and our communities to foster respect, equity, and accountability. Her voice softened. To those who have been ignored, belittled, or erased because of who they are, know that your dignity matters. It is recognized. It is protected. She lowered the microphone and the cabin erupted into applause. For a moment, Camilla allowed herself a small, quiet smile. This was not about revenge. It was about justice. The captain's voice came on the intercom. Calm and professional. We are beginning our descent into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts." The atmosphere had shifted. There was a renewed sense of respect, even among the crew. Camilla felt the tension in her shoulders ease just a bit. As the plane began its slow descent, she thought about the long road ahead. There would be lawsuits. There would be corporate restructuring. There would be painful conversations and perhaps hard truths to face. But for now, she had reclaimed her space, her voice, and her power. Because she was not just a passenger, she was a leader. And on this flight, that truth had finally been heard. The wheels of Flight 622 touched down smoothly at Chicago O'Hare. The cabin buzzed softly with anticipation. Passengers gathered their belongings and whispered among themselves, their eyes often returning to Dr. Camilla Reese. Some nodded at her with quiet respect, others simply watched, caught between curiosity and admiration. Camilla remained seated, her composure intact. She knew the moment her feet touched the jet bridge, a storm of reckoning would begin. But that storm was not one of chaos. It was the cleansing thunder of justice. Once the plane came to a complete stop, an announcement came from the cockpit. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while ground staff prepares to welcome some special guests." Camilla exchanged a glance with Zara Patel, the junior flight attendant who had quietly supported her throughout the ordeal. Zara's eyes shone with a mixture of nervousness and pride. The cabin doors opened. Airport security and legal representatives from Aerovar Holdings stepped aboard, their expressions serious but purposeful. "Ms. Reese," one of them greeted respectfully. "We're here to assist you." Camilla stood slowly, the weight of the moment settling over her. The passengers around her shifted as well, sensing that the ordinary flight routine had ended. In the galley, the senior flight crew, Marnie Ellison, Victoria Hale, and Jason Miller were waiting. Their faces were pale, and their usual arrogance had evaporated. They knew what was coming. Camilla approached them calmly. "I want to thank you for your years of service," she said evenly. "But today marks a turning point." Marnie's lip trembled. "Please, Dr. Reese, there must be some misunderstanding." Camilla shook her head. "No misunderstanding. Your actions were deliberate and discriminatory. You tore my ticket. You ignored my credentials. You treated me as less than human." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "We were just following protocol." "No," Camilla replied firmly. "You were following prejudice." The legal team moved forward. "Pursuant to company policy and the directive of the board, your contracts are terminated effective immediately." The 3 crew members stood rooted in shock. The magnitude of the consequences was sinking in. Passengers watched silently as the trio gathered their belongings and were escorted off the plane by security. Some filmed the moment. Others murmured their approval. The hashtags, "Justice Served," and "Yon Aerovar Truth" already trended online as news spread. Camilla turned to the cabin. "Today, we send a clear message. Discrimination will no longer be tolerated. This is only the beginning of our commitment to change." Zara stepped forward, voice steady, "And I pledge to stand for that change, every day." The cabin erupted in applause. It wasn't just for Camilla. It was for every passenger who had ever felt unseen, unheard, and unvalued. Outside the plane, reporters gathered, cameras flashed, microphones were extended. Camilla, poised and dignified, addressed the media. Aerovar Holdings is committed to building an airline where respect is guaranteed for all passengers, regardless of race or appearance. This incident exposed a wound in our system, but it also gave us an opportunity to heal and grow. She spoke of accountability, transparency, and reform. Her words were met with nods, questions, and renewed hope. Later, in the executive offices of Aerovar Holdings, Camilla convened an emergency board meeting via video conference. The room was filled with familiar faces, leaders, legal counsel, and diversity officers. Her assistant, Jennifer Lee, managed the flow. Camilla addressed them firmly. This was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a deeper problem that demands systemic reform. We will launch a full audit of our hiring, training, and service policies. We will implement mandatory diversity training and establish clear channels for reporting discrimination. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to resonate. Our passengers deserve better. Our employees deserve better. And we, as leaders, owe it to them to create a culture where respect is foundational, not optional. The board members nodded, some visibly moved by the resolve in her voice. As the meeting closed, Camilla allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The journey ahead was daunting. Change rarely came without resistance, but she was ready, because she was more than a CEO, she was a catalyst. The aftermath of Flight 612's incident rippled far beyond the confines of the airport terminal. In the days that followed, news outlets, social media, and corporate offices buzzed with reactions ranging from outrage to support, confusion to calls for reform. Yet, through all the noise, Dr. Camilla Reese found herself caught in a quiet moment of reflection. She sat alone in her office, the city skyline stretching behind her in the late afternoon sun. The hum of the building around her was a distant murmur, an echo of the storm that had passed but not yet settled. Her fingers tapped lightly against the wood grain of her desk as she stared at a framed photograph on the wall, a black and white image of her grandmother, a woman whose strength had been forged in struggle, whose dignity had endured through hardship. Camilla thought about that moment on the plane, the cold dismissal, the torn ticket, the challenge to her very existence. It was more than an insult. It was a reflection of an entire system built on bias and invisibility. The silence that had followed that moment had been almost as loud as the harsh words themselves. She remembered the faces of the passengers, some shocked, some sympathetic, others indifferent. But most of all, she remembered the courage of those few who had stood beside her, the young flight attendants, the passengers who had recorded the incident, and the quiet strength she herself had summoned. In the silence of her office, Camilla wrestled with a familiar inner dialogue, a tension between vulnerability and resilience. Was it enough to remove those responsible? To promise change from the boardroom, or was this just the beginning of a longer battle? She closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the weight of that question. The responsibility of leadership was a heavy cloak. Sometimes it was a shield. Other times it felt like a chain. Her phone vibrated softly on the desk. A message from Jennifer Lee. Jennifer, the board wants you at the city council meeting tomorrow. They're pushing for a public statement and a partnership with community groups. Camilla nodded to herself. This fight was no longer confined to a plane or a corporation. It was a movement. Her mind wandered back to the flight attendants she had dismissed. What would their lives look like now? Would they understand the gravity of what they had done, or would bitterness and denial blind them further? She knew too well the cost of accountability, not just to others, but to oneself. Her thoughts turned to her team at Aurelia Systems, her technology company focused on educational equity. How many of her employees had faced similar discrimination in their daily lives? How many had felt invisible, undervalued, or dismissed? She thought of her niece, Zoe, just finishing high school, full of hope and potential, yet walking a world that often judged her by skin color before character. Camilla's fingers traced the edge of the photograph again. Her grandmother's steady gaze seemed to ask, "What will you do now?" A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jennifer entered with a stack of papers and a tablet displaying news headlines about the Skyward Airlines scandal. "We're trending nationwide," Jennifer said, eyes bright but serious. "The stories, the videos, the calls for change, it's all building momentum." Camilla took a deep breath. "Momentum is good, but we need action." Jennifer nodded. "The city council wants to collaborate with you. They want to push legislation on anti-discrimination in transportation and hospitality industries." Camilla's heart quickened. This was an opportunity to transform pain into policy, to ensure that no one else would be told they didn't belong in a seat they had earned. She glanced at the tablet again. Comments flooded in, some supportive, others dismissive, some hateful. The digital world was a mirror reflecting humanity in all its complexity. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a video message from Zara Patel. "Ms. Reese, I wanted to thank you again for standing up. It's changed how I see my job, my voice, my future." Camilla smiled softly. "Thank you, Zara. Keep standing. We need more people like you." The conversation left Camilla with a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about one flight or one airline. It was about dismantling systemic barriers, about rewriting narratives. She spent the rest of the evening drafting a statement to share publicly. A message not just of outrage, but of hope and commitment. As the city lights flickered on beyond her window, Camilla knew this was the quiet before the next storm. A storm she was ready to face. The morning light filtered softly through the large windows of the conference room, where Camilla Reese sat at the head of a long, polished table. Around her, representatives from the aviation industry, community leaders, and legal experts gathered. The air buzzed with anticipation and urgency. Today was not just a meeting, it was a reckoning. The scandal aboard Flight 622 had cracked open a lid that many in the industry had tried to keep firmly shut. Discrimination, racial bias, and systemic inequality were not just whispered rumors anymore, they were exposed truths demanding immediate attention. Camilla looked around the room. Faces of men and women. Some uneasy, others resolute. She knew some saw her as a threat, a disruptor to the comfortable status quo. Others saw her as a beacon of hope. She took a breath and began. "Thank you all for coming. We are here because the events on Flight 622 are symptomatic of a deeper problem in our industry. This is not just about one airline or one flight crew. It is about a culture that has long allowed prejudice to persist." Heads nodded in agreement, though some eyes remained guarded. "We must commit to transparency, accountability, and most importantly, systemic change." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The actions of those crew members who denied me a seat I had rightfully purchased reflect attitudes that harm not just passengers, but our entire industry's reputation and viability." A man in a sharp suit, the CEO of a major airline, shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Reese, While the incident was regrettable, we must balance change with practicality. Our industry operates under strict protocols and pressures. Camilla's gaze was steady. Protocol should never be used to justify discrimination. When we allow bias to dictate who receives respect and who does not, we lose sight of our duty to every traveler. The room grew quiet. She continued, "Today, I propose a coalition and alliance dedicated to combating discrimination in air travel, a coalition that includes carriers, regulators, and passenger advocacy groups." A woman at the far end, a civil rights attorney, leaned forward. "This is long overdue. We've seen countless complaints dismissed or ignored." Camilla nodded. "Exactly. We will establish clear reporting mechanisms, mandatory training, and enforce consequences for violations." She turned to the legal counsel. "I want to work with you to draft policies that are binding, transparent, and enforceable." Another participant, a veteran flight attendant, spoke up. "Change requires more than policies. It requires culture shifts. We need education, awareness, and empathy embedded in our training programs." Camilla agreed. "Absolutely. Culture is shaped daily by every interaction on board. We must invest in that human element." The meeting stretched on. Ideas flowed. Commitments were made. Camilla listened carefully, balancing optimism with realism. After the meeting, as attendees filtered out, a reporter approached her. "Dr. Reese, do you believe this incident will change the airline industry?" She smiled softly. "It has to, because no one should ever feel less than human in the skies. Our work has just begun, but I'm hopeful." Back in her office later, Camilla reflected on the day. She knew the path ahead was long and difficult. There would be resistance, setbacks, and painful reckonings, but she was ready to lead, because leadership was not about comfort. It was about courage and change. The late evening cityscape glittered outside Camilla Reese's penthouse office, a stark contrast to the turmoil stirring within her. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of a clock and the faint hum of the air conditioning. For the first time in days, Camilla allowed herself to sit back, unburden her shoulders, and breathe. Yet, even in this moment of stillness, her mind raced. The events on Flight 622 had ignited a firestorm not just publicly, but deeply personal battles she had carried for years. She thought about the countless times she had been underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. The long nights spent proving herself in rooms where she was often the only black woman. The microaggressions that piled up like silent stones on her heart. The quiet sacrifices made to maintain grace under pressure. Her phone vibrated, a message from her niece, Zoe. "Zoe, Aunt Cam. Saw the news. Proud of you. Keep pushing. We all need you." Camilla smiled softly. Zoe's words reminded her why this fight mattered beyond the boardrooms and headlines. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, whose sacrifices had paved the way for Camilla's success. The resilience and wisdom passed down through generations shaped her identity. Yet, she also wrestled with the shadow she rarely acknowledged, a creeping doubt. Was the cost of this battle worth it? The strain on relationships, the constant public scrutiny, the pressure to embody strength at all times. She remembered a conversation from years ago with a mentor who had warned her about the loneliness leadership often brought. "You will carry burdens others do not see. You must find your sanctuary." Camilla's sanctuary was rare moments like this, quiet, unguarded. Her phone buzzed again. This time an email from the legal team outlining the next steps in the investigation and upcoming hearings. She read through the details, her mind flipping between strategy and exhaustion. A knock at the door interrupted her. Jennifer Lee stepped in, concern evident on her face. "Camilla, you should rest. The media frenzy is only growing, and tomorrow brings another round of meetings." Camilla shook her head gently. "Rest will come later, right now. I have to be ready." Jennifer sighed softly. "You're carrying too much on your own." Camilla met her assistant's eyes. "I know, but if I don't stand firm, who will?" Jennifer nodded, a silent vow passing between them. Later that night, Camilla sat by the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She pondered the path ahead, not just the public battle, but the inner journey of balancing strength with vulnerability. She whispered to herself, "I am more than the battles I fight. I am the legacy I build." And with that, she allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. The dawn light crept softly across the city skyline as Dr. Camilla Reese stood by her office window. The events of the past weeks had transformed not only Aerovar Holdings, but also her own sense of purpose. The fight on Flight 622 was more than a moment in time. It was a catalyst for lasting change. Today, she would meet with her leadership team to unveil a comprehensive reform plan for Skyward Airlines. The plan included new policies, training programs, and an accountability framework designed to root out discrimination and cultivate a culture of respect and equity. Camilla felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders, but also a steady resolve that had been forged through years of overcoming obstacles. She thought back to that flight, how a simple ticket, torn in a moment of prejudice, had become a powerful symbol of resilience. Her phone buzzed with messages from supporters, colleagues, and community leaders. The wave of public support had not only upheld her, but inspired many to demand better treatment and equality across industries. As the team gathered in the conference room, Camilla began her address. "This moment marks a turning point," she said. "We are not here to simply put out fires, but to rebuild an industry that reflects the values we claim to hold: justice, dignity, and respect for all." She outlined the changes ahead: mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all staff, a clear and accessible process for reporting discrimination, and a zero-tolerance policy for bias in any form. Questions followed, challenges were raised, but Camilla met each with clarity and unwavering commitment. Her calm authority inspired confidence. Later, she walked through the newly designed first-class lounge at Skyward's headquarters, a space now infused with art celebrating diverse cultures and messages promoting inclusivity. Her vision extended beyond her company. Camilla had begun collaborating with city officials, advocacy groups, and other airlines to create industry-wide standards. Change was no longer a distant hope. It was a concrete path forward. Yet, she remained grounded. She understood that transformation would be gradual, requiring patience, persistence, and vigilance. In the quiet moments after the meetings, Camilla allowed herself to reflect on the journey. She was reminded of her grandmother's words. "True strength is not the absence of struggle, but the courage to keep moving forward despite it." Camilla smiled softly. Her fight was far from over. But with every step, she was shaping a future where no one would be told they didn't belong, where every seat in the sky was a place of dignity, where justice soared alongside every flight. And as she prepared for the days ahead, she knew she would never stand alone, because courage, integrity, and leadership could ignite change far beyond any cabin door. Camilla Reese's story is a powerful reminder that dignity and respect are not privileges. They are rights everyone deserves, no matter who they are or what they look like. What began as a humiliating moment on a flight became a catalyst for change, exposing deep-rooted discrimination that too often goes unchallenged. We honor the courage it takes to stand firm in the face of prejudice and applaud those who refuse to accept silence when injustice speaks loudest. Yet, this story also calls us to reflect on how far society must still go to ensure fairness in every cabin, every workplace, and every community. Discrimination leaves scars not only on its victims but on the fabric of us all. It is only by recognizing these wounds and demanding accountability that we can begin to heal. Thank you for witnessing this journey with us. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we will continue to shine a light on stories that matter, stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us that true strength comes from standing up for what is right. Stay with us for more stories of courage and change. Your voice matters,